Welcome back to My Mythical Meta, a gaming podcast that's actually a friendship podcast. My name is Travis, and I'm joined this week by the entire Mythical Meta crew. I've got my brother Benjamin.
Hello.
Derek is here.
Yeah, I'm here.
And Randy is here.
Hey, hey.
The entire crew is here. How was y'all's week?
It's been going well.
Yeah,
I guess.
okay.
I've actually had a wisdom tooth infection that I've been soldiering through for like a whole week.
That is
the medicine should kick in as we go further into this episode, but I'm in agony right now.
Oh, that's too bad. Earlier last summer, I had all 4 of my wisdom teeth removed at the same time.
Oof.
And because I'm in my 30s and not like in my teens or early 20s, the recovery period was agonizing. It was awful. And I still have like holes in my gums where whenever I brush, I have to like take extra concerted effort to get food out of them and stuff. They're just not closing the way they would if I were in my 20s. Ugh. And I was just in agonizing pain for like 2 weeks afterwards.
I remember that.
So, teeth are bad, man.
It's a very humbling pain. Like,
Yeah.
I know childbirth is, an awful thing to go through, but I think everyone can agree that tooth pain is like a pain you can't escape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
4 white guys sitting in their podcast saying, yeah, tooth pain is definitely right up there with childbirth.
I'm not saying it's as high. I'm just saying I think everyone across every gender and race and all that stuff can agree tooth pain is a...
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Do y'all remember in the movie Castaway where
Yes.
Tom Hanks has to use that ice skate
I forgot.
to knock that tooth out of his mouth? Tooth stuff weirds me out, y'all.
Oh, yeah, me too.
Yeah.
I mean, I know I've told y'all about it, but I'll tell the listeners. I have a constantly recurring dream. It probably happens once a month of my teeth falling out.
Oof.
Oh, Lord.
I have that dream every once in a while.
It's awful. My dad says that he constantly has that dream too, and he knows the source of his. It's because his dad, my grandpa, had dentures ever since he was in his 20s because of the army. And he would just pop them out, just like all the time. Like he'd just be sitting there and he'd just pop his dentures out and pop them back in. Sickening. But yeah, I have that dream all the time. And then Benjamin's daughter Margaret will run up to me and show me, hey, you want to see my loose tooth?
No! Out of here.
Well, welcome. I'm so glad you guys are here. I spent last weekend painting some more miniatures. I am making more progress on the X-Men. I painted Magneto and his 2 metal constructs. So if you're watching the video, I'll make sure to get those pictures in, along with my pictures of all of the others. I charged my wife's very nice camera yesterday, and I'm going to set up my little photo studio that I usually use for dice. I'm going to set up my miniatures and take some really good studio pictures.
Nice.
Anybody else making progress towards their New Year's resolutions?
I actually went running. I ran almost 3 miles. That was like 2.96.
Whoa! Holy moly!
Today, and that was a big step for me. I didn't go for the full 3, because I could have, but I wanted to keep a little something on the tank for later. I didn't want to peak too soon.
Sure.
Those little
I could have, but I wanted to get home and eat some ice cream.
Yeah. I had a center stick.
Oh, Benjamin?
Yeah.
How much longer do you have for your school weight loss contest?
Till April 12th.
Oh,
so
okay. Plenty of time.
I have kind of stalled. I haven't stalled in the habits. I'm still limiting the calories, but my body's kind of like, I feel comfortable here. I don't want to drop those pounds yet. So I got to do something to kick it into overdrive.
Oh, dang.
But I did finish Steins Gate, the
anime?
manga.
Or the
No,
manga?
both. I finished
okay.
the anime last year, but I finished the complete manga.
Ooh.
And I
What'd you
started
think?
another book. It was great. I mean, they're very similar. The manga and the anime aren't too far off.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was good.
Randy and I watched all of Steins Gate in a weekend a couple years ago.
So good.
Oh, it's amazing.
First time I watched it, I did it all in one night.
All listeners, if you haven't experienced Steins Gate, that's my recommendation. Binge all of it as much as you can, because if you take a week between episodes, it won't make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
very
kind of true.
very bingeable.
Yes, but super bingeable. Yeah.
My recommendation for the listener is to watch For All Mankind on Apple TV. I finally finished season 4, and wow, what a show, man!
Cool.
I'm
Yeah,
on
I need
season 1
to.
still.
I need to get back into that show. I think I mentioned before that I watched 2 or 3 episodes and then it hadn't caught me yet.
That's
But
right.
I'll give it another shot.
I'm ready to go to NASA, goof around.
You live right there.
I know, and I want to, but no one will go with me.
Kristen and I
feel
go
like
with her family like all the time.
to NASA.
Yeah.
Oh,
Not necessarily all the time, but like I'd say every other visit when her sister's down, we go to NASA.
that's cool.
Yeah.
I keep trying to talk my niece into going because I feel like it only makes sense if I go with the kid.
Uh-huh.
But she's a little resistant to the idea, but I think I'll win her over.
Most of NASA is like museum-like stuff. There is like a kid's place, which is kind of like a playground and a bunch of computer games that don't work. I mean, sorry, NASA, pick up your game if you want me to hype you up.
Yeah.
But most of it is cool museum stuff, like artifacts and relics of space trips. And of course, there's a Mars exhibit that has a bunch of nothing. It's like, these are things that can happen in the future.
This is so
And
sad.
it's like, I thought this is a museum.
Right?
Like, show me a
But-
bunch of stuff you've done. I mean,
Anyways.
have any of the rest of you been to NASA, or is this just me?
Not lately. It's been, high school. We used to go all the time.
Oh.
Or
Yeah,
middle
same.
school, whatever.
I went once when I was like 8, so I
Oh,
have,
man, you
I
gotta
have
go
no
again.
idea what's there.
Yeah. We actually had plans to take the kids to NASA at the end of last summer with Mom, and then everybody got sick.
Yeah. It's pretty cool. Like, they do have a couple hangars of actual rockets and stuff, which is pretty awesome.
That's cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, after that checkup, it is time for our shout-outs. We're going to shout out our number 1 patron, David. David, thank you
right.
so much for your contribution through Patreon. Anyone can become a patron by going to patreon.com/mymythicalmeta. Here are your perks for joining our $4 tier. A 20% off code for eldoradogaming.com. Early and ad-free content. Everything you get through the Patreon will be ad-free. And access to the My Mythical Meta Discord server. That Discord server is literally where we post our show notes, where we prepare for recordings, and we are excited to hang out with patrons and play games and build decks for Magic the Gathering, talk Martian Colony or Dungeons & Dragons or Mage. We're excited to have a community of like-minded gamers in our Discord server. Derek, what is this week's surprise Patreon perk?
You know, it's funny you ask. I was just talking to Benjamin maybe like 10 minutes before we started, and he was telling me that he would love to teach a lucky patron how to ride a bicycle. And I think it's really honorable. You'd have to bring your own bicycle and provide your own transportation, but he is super down with it.
Benjamin,
All right.
are you in fact down with it?
Sure. In fact,
I mean, he told me. I don't know why he would back out now.
That sounds
I mean-
wonderful. Yeah. Listeners, if you don't know how to ride a bike and it's too late in your life to admit to your loved ones that you don't know, join our Patreon. Any one of the 4 of us can step up and do that.
I mean, I'll
But-
teach you to ride it the cool way. One hand, doing wheelies.
I'll teach you how to rollerblade.
Oh, I don't know if I trust him on that one.
no.
That's funny for us because I hadn't rollerbladed in 10 years, and the first time I tried to, I broke my arm, so. But bike riding is pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to this week's topic. This week, we are going to talk about fear. What fear does to a person in a game. In this case, we're going to call this fear the Boogeyman. This is when you are going into a game against a friend, maybe someone at your shop who everyone knows. Maybe it's the store owner, but then they pull out the deck that everyone has talked about. Or if it's your friend, they pull out their most powerful deck. You've seen it a couple times before. It doesn't have to be in Magic. This happens in lots of games. Our kind of backup game for having meta discussions like this is Super Smash Bros. When your friend switches to their main. They've been jumping around and having fun with all of the other characters, oh, look, I'm Isabella. Oh, look, I'm Snake. And then Derek switches to Mario or Ganondorf. And I'm just sitting there like, man, I thought we were having fun. I thought this was just fun items play, in Smash Brothers. But no, Derek wants to get real.
He's a man's man. I don't know what you want me to do.
For example, my main in Smash Brothers was Young Link. And if I pulled out Young Link, my opponents knew that they were in for an arduous battle with lots of ranged attacks, lots of projectiles, lots of kiting and agile maneuverability, and they knew that they needed to bring in other moves to counter that. Maybe they needed to use the stage to their advantage, or hide out of line of sight so I couldn't hit them with my projectiles, or they need to armor through the boomerang so that they can hit me with something heavy. Like, those are things that people have to know when I pull out my best character. In other games, somebody uses their most powerful army, or their most powerful list, or team, whatever game you're playing, whether it's Warhammer, or X-Wing, or Armada, or Marvel Crisis Protocol. When somebody pulls out the meta list, these are boogeymen. Things that when you see them, they can strike fear in you and they can mess up your gameplay.
Fear's the mind killer, right?
I was going to say the same thing. The Dune has promoted us. Releases March 1st.
Oh, yes.
We need to make sure we all go out there.
Dune is sponsoring us?
Dune 2, yeah.
Dune 2 is sponsoring this podcast?
Yes.
Yeah, Timothy
Here's the
Chalamet
little
was
death.
supposed to be here next episode, but I think he's canceled. So
Yeah, that's really too bad.
Zendaya might sub in.
Yeah,
but we'll
Zendaya's
see.
going to pop in as a quick sub for Timothy Chalamet.
Anyways, fear, it can mess up your gameplay, right? It can lead you to being tilted, can lead you to feel unhappy before anything bad has actually happened. It leaves you tilted and kind of feeling helpless. You can go in a couple ways. Sometimes that makes you, hopefully, play your hardest, but a lot of people go, I'm up against Michael Jordan, might as well not try. And, you give the boogeyman the easy win because you give up before the game started. So, speaking of Dune, fear's the mind killer's the famous part of that quote, but what comes after it, I think, is, right, it's the little death that brings total oblivion. So if you don't face your fear, if you just let it win over and over, then eventually it'll overtake your gaming or whatever it is you're afraid of and unwilling to face.
Yeah.
I think the concept of a boogeyman in a game like Magic, or you're talking about Super Smash Brothers, is the one where when they pull it out, you just kind of get this sinking feeling of the fear doesn't have to necessarily be this kind of horror dread type. It can just be a it sucks the fun.
That doubt creeps in.
Yeah,
it can be that kind of doldrums feeling.
Yeah,
just where everything kind of gets muted and you wonder what the point is.
Yeah, and that's kind of the depression response to fear.
Yeah,
but it could be dread, like, I don't have anything that could beat this. I'm about to spend 30 minutes not having a good time. It could be anger of, man, why would they do that to me now? We were having such a good time. I think there's a lot of ways people deal with the fear of it, but I do think it is possible to have a good time against the boogeyman.
Yeah.
But so hopefully we can get around to resolving that here.
Yeah, I mean, let's get around to it now. There are some benefits when someone pulls out their best character or their best deck or their best army. You immediately have the advantage of knowledge. You have seen it before. If you've seen it before, that's what's causing that fear response. But that is a plus. It has only become a boogeyman through reputation. But you have seen it, and you do know its moves. And you can use that to your benefit. For example, maybe this boogeyman deck relies on a solved strategy that someone has discussed online or in a podcast. A lot of Magic players will say this is a net deck. It's something that somebody else discovered, and they're just piloting it. Well, if it is someone else's net deck, its weaknesses may have been discovered too, and you can start considering those as part of your strategy and as part of your deck building. Say you are a competitive player and you know what the most competitive, tier 1 decks are, then you can put answers in your deck that answer them. You can put responses in your deck that answer those tier 1 threats.
Yeah. When I am faced with a boogeyman, I think this comes from being a spike. If people want to go back to our a recent episode about psychographics, I think spikes often approach it as a challenge.
Yeah.
To say, hey, this is, it's the final boss, and I want to beat it. It's the Elite Four. It's the rival. Whatever the end game is. I'm about to face it now. I can pull out my best deck, and we can have an epic battle, or I can pull out a deck I'm trying to get good at and grow, or I can, come back later with something that I know can defeat this particular thing. And I noticed that this is something that Derek does often, especially because, he starts to say, oh, Benjamin plays all these decks with graveyard shenanigans. I'm going to start putting in graveyard hate. Randy did it too. He started playing, Ground Seal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
In everything. And I'm like, ah.
I think it was Silent Gravestone.
Oh yeah, you did play Silent Gravestone too. I don't know. Everybody started doing it, right? And that's kind of the idea, is like, instead of saying, well, there's no way to permanently get rid of stuff because he keeps getting it back, you say, no, it's going to stay dead. You level up your game when you start to realize that the boogeyman is beatable, but it takes a bit to get there. And I think the more competitive among us are the ones who get there first.
I feel like this is what I've been saying every time we talk about learning from our mistakes, that kind of talk. That boogeyman is scary, but the experience is what you need to beat them. If the deck is beating you or whatever, try playing with that deck and seeing what actually makes it tick. It's once you realize things have the faults in them, you can start seeing the cracks, and even like the gods bleed, or however that saying goes, it becomes less scary. It becomes a mortal thing that can be killed and beaten. And I feel like this is kind of what I've been working towards in my gaming. There are a lot of things that I used to be like scared to play against. I used to be upset by playing against. And it would create such a helpless feeling in me where I'm like, oh, I'm getting locked out. I'm getting beaten down. I can't do anything. And I'm getting mad. I'm getting salty or what have you. And I've just kind of learned from those experiences to make decks that can survive those encounters and would give me the tools to kind of push through, I guess.
Yeah. Randy, what do you think about facing Boogeyman? What's your experience? Facing a deck that gives you that fear or gives you that anxiety, how have you changed your approach to Boogeyman?
I feel like I see a deck that I hate. When that deck comes out and it's the Boogeyman, I'm like, I know I'm not going to win, but I'm going to do anything I can to make sure it doesn't.
Yeah.
That's my personal, just kind of like, it's like, I don't have the skills, but I will throw anything I have to stop it. It may not be much. I may be a small speed bump compared to
What
it.
stage do we call that? Anger or bargaining?
Acceptance.
It's acceptance.
Oh, that's acceptance?
I've accepted that it's a monster. I'm not going to win. It's acceptance with a little bit of like anger in there of like, screw you. So it's like I will try to destroy a creature that looks like it could be important, or just anything I can to make their life, anything I can to make that deck not pop off. And if I win, it's even better. If I don't, well, hopefully that deck didn't win either.
Sure. I think my response to Boogeyman is usually to enlist the help of the other two players.
Yeah.
I think that's what I try to do, is I try to enlist the help of the other two by calling out the things the deck has done before and saying, listen, if we all do X, Y, and Z, we can stop that deck from doing its oppressive thing. I feel like I do the same in like Smash Brothers or whatever. It's like, guys, Derek played Mario and I can't do it by myself. So, Kristen, Kirby, I need you to throw your hammer over at him a few times.
Soften me up.
I will add that trying to stop the deck is what I try to do. Am I good at it? Probably not. Am I good at my threat assessment? Probably not. But I can see y'all in y'all's head while I was saying that, being like, he never does that. Like, I'm not good at it. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, so what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the decks in our own meta that we view as Boogeyman. A deck that is just really powerful. It's a notch above the others, and we find ourselves, trying to play as tight as we can, trying to find that deck's weakness, and then plant the silver bullets for that deck in our own future decks. I know I've talked about throwing in cards that say your opponents can't gain life as a counter to a deck that used to be in our meta and is no longer, Randy's Darien deck. May he rest in peace.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to do. If you're not a Magic player, I still encourage you to stick around and listen to how we talk about our moves against those decks, or our attitudes or our thoughts about those decks, so that you can see how we build ourselves up, how we maneuver around that fear that that deck strikes in us, so that it doesn't become personal, so that we don't start, looking at each other as a players and saying that is an unfun player. No, they're not an unfun player. They made a deck that is really tough to build. But as we've always been saying throughout my Mythical meta, that's an obstacle for each individual to overcome and become stronger, to become a smarter player. So, which of you wants to go first about the decks in our own meta that just really stick out to you as Boogeyman?
I'll start.
Sure.
I feel like I have maybe the shortest list.
Uh-huh.
So I'm going to start with Derek's decks. For me, Gishath is one of the decks that when it comes out, I just resign myself to a loss. I roll my eyes. I'm like, all right, let's watch these dinosaurs just do dinosaur things.
Oh, yeah.
And
Everybody do the dinosaur, baby.
yeah, God. I think I've figured out kind of a theme. It's anything that's red and green and cheats things out. But that's all three of the decks I have. It's Gishath, Henzi, which I know Henzi has more than red and green, and Joda. They're all just, let me ramp real fast and cheat out big stuff that shouldn't be cheated out. But Gishath is that for dinosaurs. The second one is Joda, which I believe we've only technically fought once.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And
it
I
earned
already,
him 11 points.
Yeah, it already is like, oh, it's a turn 5. You got all the stuff on board. You've cascaded 12 times in one turn. It's like, where do you throw that counter spell? It's like,
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to choose.
yeah. And then I'm doing these just kind of real quick. And then Henzi, same thing. It uses a mechanic called Blitz, and it gets a card out of his hand onto the battlefield. They pretty much all have enter the battlefield effects. So they enter. There's nothing to stop them from entering, basically. Or, I mean, unless you counter. But anyway, they enter. They do the thing. They attack because they're a big 6/6 with trample, probably. And then they leave. And then he draws a card to replenish the one he used.
Right.
So he's just constantly drawing into new creatures to then blitz back out and do it again.
Yeah, or, I cheat them out with the blitz. They die. And then I have cards in the deck that let me get stuff out of the graveyard back on the field for cheap.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Blitz
So-
is one of those mechanics. I really think I underestimated it when it came out.
Me too.
When it first came out, I was like, you're giving all your stuff that one turn haste? I don't know, but God, Henzi is such a beast to deal with. And here's why. You get Henzi out the first time, he gives everything in your hand, Blitz, and it costs 1 less. Because that's how many times you've cast Henzi. Well, you don't want Derek to have Blitz in his hand. So, you kill Henzi. Whether you exile it or kill it or whatever. It doesn't matter. Well, when he recasts Henzi, the Blitz is now even worse. Because now everything costs 2 less than it did before. It's still green, red, black, so it's still ramping really hard. All the ramp is pretty much the same as Gishath. It's all just a ton of land-based ramp that we admit in our meta is generally stronger because we don't generally do a lot of land destruction. We do occasionally see some targeted land destruction, Tectonic Edge or the occasional Strip Mine or Ghost Quarter. But in terms of like mass land destruction or destroy all non-basic lands, like that stuff just doesn't happen in our meta. And so both Gishath and Henzi are all ramping out so hard that removing the commander once or even twice just is not going to slow it down. It's not going to slow down Gishath because Gishath has haste. Right, Derek? Doesn't Gishath have haste? It's not going to slow down Henzi because Henzi's not attacking. It's giving all the blitz stuff to your hand.
Right, and Henzi also eats that removal so that way when I cheat stuff back out the second time from the graveyard or whatever,
Yeah.
their removal's not being used on that. And that's what's the really scary part.
Yeah. Sorry, Randy. I just wanted to pop in
No, you're fine.
add a little
fine.
context because literally Gishath and Henzi were both on my list of Derek's Boogeyman decks.
Yeah, mine too.
They just feel inevitable. Like
Yeah, that's a good way to describe them.
Gishath's ability is that whenever he deals combat damage, you flip the number of cards from the top of your deck equal to the damage you dealt. Any dinosaurs you see in that reveal, you get to just play onto the battlefield. Well, Gishath's power is 7. You throw up a chump block, he still gets to look at 5 cards.
And even only 2 of them are dinosaurs. That's still...
Yeah.
Dinosaurs are typically bigger.
Yeah, that's still...
And ETB effects, and it's just...
Yeah, their ETB effects, their enrage triggers, which makes them amazing blockers.
I don't have any enrage in the deck anymore.
Oh, there's no enrage in the deck anymore?
No, now there's enough dinosaurs where I can cut the enraged dinosaurs.
Nice.
It's not a very good mechanic.
Sure.
When you don't have the support, but now there's like a lot of good stuff, like the new Itali and stuff.
Now there's just even better dinosaurs.
Yes.
But still, they all have big bodies, and which one do you remove? Do you remove Gishath, who's going to let him get even more? Or do you remove Itali Primal Storm, which might get him some free spells? It's a toss-up, because everything in the deck is so good.
I just like dinosaurs.
I get it. No reason not to.
For Benjamin's decks, I have picked Nethroi, Apex of Death. I remember that I didn't like the deck, and Travis reminded me why before the podcast, is that basically the deck is full of little 1/1 cards, and Nethroi just lets them... Or no, it's not 1/1, it's 1 mana?
1 power.
One power.
1 power.
1 power.
1 power or 0 power.
Yeah, so creatures that have 1 power or less can just come back at the instep, and they're all like, of course, when they die, they make you sacrifice something, or they do something else that's a pain. So he just, when they die, that's great for him, because then he comes back and he does it again. So that's like, it's oppressive to play against.
Yeah, the thing I thought about with Nethroi is, of course, its hidden commander is Shirei, Shizo's storehouse.
That's the real rough one.
Yeah, Benjamin has some ways to get Shirei out pretty quickly, and then everything in the deck pretty much has 1 or 0 power. And so for as long as Shirei is out, the entire deck's resilience is just top-notch. And it's the same issue. If you remove something, it's going to come right back out. And if you remove Shirei, Benjamin's commander can get him back. Nethroi doesn't come out until Shirei's been destroyed.
That's why we run Graveyard Hate, guys.
Yeah,
Yep.
That's why we've got to run Graveyard Hate and Exile effects and stuff like that. Because Benjamin has his answer to Shirei's death in his command zone. It's always accessible. You can't get rid of that answer for it. So that is an insanely resilient deck as well. And again, it seems so difficult to pick one thing to remove, because it's just going to come right back, and it's not going to have done anything.
Again, It feels futile.
Yeah.
Zakama and Zerda deck from Benjamin is one I hate. It's many Zakama.
Y'all did this to me.
Zakama is one of the few cards it's Zakama, Kenrith, and Lord Wingwraith. It's cards that just have a million abilities on them that just cost a few mana. And it's I can exile your stuff, or I can deal damage to your stuff, or I can draw a card, or I can do this or do that. It's like getting 5 more cards into your hand that just stay there, and you can just keep playing them over and over again. And I hate it, just having a repeatable answer like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay, well, I can't play anything because for 2 mana he can just kill it before it does anything. So I have to wait until it's removed, and then I can do anything else. So, yeah,
Zakama Zerga is on my list, and I think out of every deck that we have, this is the one that fills me with the dread.
It's also a dinosaur.
Yeah, it's a dinosaur. It's got 3 abilities. One's gain life, another's a destroy target artifact or enchantment, and the other one's deal 3 damage, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And with Zerda, it's just 1 mana. So as soon as he casts his commander, he's untapping his lands, and then he's machine gunning everything. And it is so cheap for him to just kind of wipe all our boards, and the time it took us
cheap
to
as in
build
unfair, or cheap literally the mana price?
Cheap is literally the mana price. 1 green mana is taking out all artifacts and enchantments, or he's just doing a ton of damage to our creatures or our faces.
Right.
It's just so much value, and this is the one I am really scared of.
I did not put it on my deck because I feel like Zerda is an answerable thing. Absolutely, Zakama having all of those abilities for 3 is still crazy. Don't get me wrong, it's still an amazing card. But Zerda we can deal with.
But can you?
Yeah, I remember when we had to like triple team Zerda just to get it off the board.
Yeah, that's true.
It does lose its steam without Zerda, but it's still a very good deck.
Like, I feel like Zakama is one of those, like, it has a glaring weakness, and that glaring weakness is Zerda.
Yeah, the issue is though is Derek said it can run out of steam without Zerda, but it's like, well, if you let it have a turn with Zerda,
Right.
and he blows up your board, well then you enter Zerda and you get Zerda out of there. Well, he's like, well, I don't need as much of that steam.
Yeah, that's true too.
Now I've got a 9/9.
Then just made. Well, yeah, but it's like, okay, it costs 3, but paying 3 to keep the pressure and not have to worry about like doing a whole bunch at once.
Yeah, that's true too.
It's like, oh, I'm getting rid of that card this turn and this card that turn, and he can kind of keep us down until he gets Zerda back out.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think he's built the deck. I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong, Benjamin, but building the deck that Zerda dying isn't an inevitability, so you've built it to get her out over and over.
Yes, a lot of the cards in the deck, if they're not part of the game plan, I've probably got 5 or 6 things that are meant to recur or protect Zerda. I kind of figured out after the first few times I played with Zakama and y'all, like you said, triple teamed Zerda, and I was like, well, dang it. I worked so hard to protect it, and I basically said, okay, I'm just not going to play Zerda until I play Zakama, untap, 9 lands, spend 3 of them to get Zerda into my hand, spend another 3 to play it, and then immediately, before y'all can kill it, I can just fire off 3 abilities. And so I'm going to get 3 activations before y'all do anything, and I could just hold it up. I can hold up protection, and then it's like, oh, go to my turn? Fine, now I fire off the 3 abilities. It's the same number of abilities I'd be able to fire off if I didn't cast Zerda, so
yeah, you're
I
still
figured,
breaking
okay,
even.
That's fine. I'll just...
And you could pay the companion price
We got one
earlier to
round.
get it into your hand.
Yeah.
That's true, yeah. And then that would give me 6 activations when I played it the first time.
And for the final deck I have is Travis's deck. The reason I only have one, I feel like I have Travis's decks on here, even though he has the most decks, is because there's such a long time period between seeing them that my little lizard brain doesn't remember how bad it could have been the last time. He may play a deck 3 times in a year, and I usually forget how the games went between play sessions.
I 100% agree. I feel the same way.
So I'm not, I was looking through it and I was like, I recognize a lot of these names and I remember them. I just don't remember
How it went and how he felt.
They don't leave a scar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Derek has like the fewest decks currently, and so I feel like they're played a bit more, and so they scar deeper, and they keep scarring. That scar tissue never gets to heal.
Yeah. Yeah,
And so,
I felt the same
Derek
way.
has the least decks, so he has the most decks on my hate list. Benjamin has the second, is in the middle, so he has 2, and then Travis has the most, so I picked 1. And I picked Sisei and Winota. And it's basically...
I mean, it's
wait
really
until
just because of
Winota comes out.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm saying, it's just like, we wait until Winota comes out, and then it wins. And it's just like, out of nowhere. I mean, the first time it happened, it was like, whoa, wait, what's happening over here? What happened to your board state? I looked over there. You had 2 cards. I looked away, looked back. You have 20 cards.
Yeah.
What happened? So it just blows up really fast, but at least it doesn't take forever to kill you. Like, it'll be that turn. It may be a long turn, but it'll be that turn.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a Boogeyman now that we've seen it once. And it's like, so Winota, I remember that one. That one was bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for anyone listening, it's not that Sisei and Winota have partner or anything like that. Sisei, Weatherlight Captain, is a 5-color commander. And she has an ability where you can pay 1 of each color mana to tutor a legendary permanent from your deck. Tutor meaning I can search my deck for any legendary permanent and get it out as long as it meets a certain requirement. So this deck, I always just call it Sisei and Winota. Winota is the hidden commander that I've actually built the deck around. So she's legendary. I can use Sisei's ability to search her out whenever I'm ready to end the game.
I've told the guys this before. The game that came out, I had decided in my mind, I was just trying to get my own information about how long into games do we get, how many turns do we get, and then how many minutes does each, once we get to turn 7, turn 8, turn 9, how long does it take per person? And I mean, it was maybe 10, 15 minutes for me, 10, 15, 20 minutes for the next person. And then Travis went, and he had got Winota out, triggered her a bunch, and it was a 45-minute turn. And he won.
It was not hemming and hawing thinking about what to do, though.
Yeah, it was a million triggers.
And I did eventually win.
Yes.
It just took me a while to find my impact trimmers. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I did get it. Yeah.
But that's my list, so who's next?
I can go next.
Yeah, go for it.
Bottom to top. So for me, I put Travis's decks first. I put the Sisei Winota. It's just same situation. I put Azuri, Claw of Progress, and Skithrix and Kedis partners. We did an unofficial, I think this was Secret Santa deck
this
where
was
he got
last year's
Skithrix
Secret
and Kedis. But both of these decks, the reason why Skithrix is on there is because of Infect, but both of these decks need to be watched with an eagle eye because they can get out of control very fast. If Skithrix untaps, you could be looking at a death, all of a sudden you're just dying to 10 Infect damage. Mm-hmm. So you have to just constantly be vigilant over that. And then Azuri,
I want to hear what you have to say about Azuri. It's been a long time since I've played it.
Yeah, it's probably not as scary, but it doesn't matter because I feel like it's just kind of evergreen. He gets experience counters from little creatures to enter the battlefield, and he gets to put those +1/+1 counters on those creatures. And I mean, it's just a good low to the ground deck that is hard to, like, even when you remove them, they're so cheap that you can just keep getting Azuri out. You can keep getting these little cheap creatures out.
It's a very traditional elf ball deck.
Yeah.
So when you say evergreen, it's exactly that, yeah.
Yeah, it is hard to control. You have to keep the pressure on Azuri, and you have to and the same with Skithrix and Kedis, you have to keep the pressure on, because if you don't pay attention to what he's doing, that's the turn you're going to lose.
Yep.
And then famously, I also put Jaleva. I feel like you had this Jaleva deck maybe like 3 or 4 years ago now.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been a while. I've become a much better deck builder. I think I could probably handle it these days.
I mean, I was thinking about what we were saying about how we handle Boogeyman, and we were talking about, adding in the answers that you need and stuff like that. But Jaleva still has the problem of exiling your deck from you.
Yeah, I could probably handle it now.
Yeah.
Just from I've built a lot of answers and a lot of things into my decks. But I think the situation with Jaleva is, like you said, she exiles. She does a lot of stuff that kind of locks you out of the game. And so it becomes a very much well, the only way I'm going to be able to play this game is if I get, Travis playing Jaleva out of the game as soon as possible. Yeah. So it kind of becomes like a toxic, not like toxic, but, it comes with a very unfun situation where you're just getting picked on. And I guess you do what you got to do.
So you're right. I don't have this Jaleva deck anymore, but I do still have the other illegal partners challenge deck that we made, where I used Prosper, Tomebound, and Vega the Watcher. So this is red, black, blue, white playing cards from exile, and Jaleva is in that deck.
Yes.
And I have literally only played that deck one time, the one time we did that challenge match, and it generates insane value because whenever you cast a card from exile, you both draw a card from Vega and get a treasure from Prosper. And so I haven't played that deck since we did that match.
I remember it being very strong.
Yeah.
Did it win?
It did win, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, it was a very good deck. And then I put an honorable mention here for Kranko Mob Boss. This was kind of like the Boogeyman when we first started out. Oh my God, he's making 1 million goblins. What are we going to do? There's just no way to beat it. It's just cheap goblins. Suddenly there's 1 million of them. Mm-hmm. Now it's just kind of well, I'll just go through the goblins.
Right, yeah.
But this one definitely lived rent-free in my head for a long time of I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to beat this. And again, it's just I played Kranko a few times. I played against him a few times. And you just kind of realize that, it kind of relies on Kranko to kind of exponentially create goblins. So if he's not there or you don't have goblins, then problem solved.
Yeah, and then anybody plays a Blasphemous Act for 1 red and you're done. So
yes. So that's what I have for Travis. Benjamin, I put Edgar Markov. This one, I'm not sure if I'm scared of anymore. You haven't played it in a while, but there was one time where you played it. I think it was me, Randy, and Benjamin. I was playing Thrun, you were playing Edgar Markov, and you and I were slugging it out fairly well. I did lose, but I think I did quite a number on you at the time. And my Thrun deck is fun, but it's not super great or anything. So I'd be interested in trying that again with my better decks.
We'll get a chance tomorrow.
Yeah.
I definitely kept Edgar Markov on my list. This deck has always been powerful because it's built right. It's not high mana value legendary vampires. It's a bunch of 1 mana bad vampires.
Yes.
And that's what you need
Yeah.
for Edgar Markov. You build the army and you use all of those vampire tokens as currency to generate, to generate mana, to generate life, to use to cast card draw spells or whatever else. It's always been a very good deck, and it's definitely one that I'm still scared of.
It is a strong deck, don't get me wrong. I just think that I maybe not get through it, but I could, on my way out, kind of take you 1 foot down, drag you into the underworld. So I'd be willing to try that one again. I put Zakama Zerta, same situation. Ravos Soul Tender and Tim of the Weaver, is that right? This one is kind of like OG. This was one of the first ones you had, or at least the first ones you played against us. And this one is resilient. It's all about getting creatures out of your graveyard. And I'm probably getting some of it confused with the Nethroi Apex of Death deck. They're very similar kind of things where you're trying to get creatures in and out of your graveyard. But this one is resilient. It is so hard to stop. And I think you just have to resign yourself like, well, I'm just going to have to do player removal because if I kill these creatures, they'll just be back next turn.
Yep. Yeah, I've always felt the same way. It's like I need to deal damage to Benjamin directly somehow. And it's really hard to do because Ravos and several other cards in that deck. I know you've got Arvad the Cursed in there, right? And then Hero's Podium. Is that another one? Yeah, so this is one of those decks where all your creatures are buffing all of your other creatures.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Elish Norn. You're right. It not only buffs up all its own creatures, but it also diminishes everybody else's creatures. And that's kind of the theme of the deck.
And then lastly, I have Orvar, the All-Father?
The All-Form.
All-Form. He's a mono blue commander who makes copies of permanents that you target with a spell. This deck is nuts, and I played it one time, and I'm just not smart enough for this deck because it's so many exponential triggers that happen. Like, oh, I've copied this, which copies this 4 times, which copies that 12 times, which, it kind of spirals out of control in one turn. This one might be your scariest deck because it's so strong of how fast it can just be unkillable all of a sudden.
Yeah, because you'll have this is a non-legendary copy of Orvar. It's like, oh god.
Yeah, here we go. Now there's 4 copies happening to create 8 tokens or something. I don't know. It gets pretty silly. And then I left a little honorable mention for Benjamin for Lord Windgrace and Derevi. Both of these decks, they are very grindy and not necessarily stacks or anything. Well, Derevi's a little bit stacksy, but they're very grindy, and it's something that it's built. Those are built for the long games. Which we usually always have. They are exhausting to fight against because he's just constantly getting value that it's hard to shut down because the further and further it gets along, he gets more cards, he gets more abilities to work with. And it's like, whew, there's a Rube Goldberg machine over there that's in motion that I can't seem to stop.
I'll go ahead and chime in here too. Lord Windgrace was on my list too. And it kind of goes along with what Randy said earlier about commanders that have 5 million options. Lord Windgrace has 3 abilities, and I have the same problem with Lord Windgrace that I do with Benjamin's Karth the Lion deck, where it's all planeswalkers, and each of those planeswalkers has 2 or 3 abilities, and my brain just fuzzes out. I just get static when Lord Windgrace is on the field or when he's playing Karth the Lion, because I can't keep track of all of his options.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it just starts going. It's like, what's happening? I hope you're not cheating.
It takes a lot to understand and to pilot those decks correctly.
Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want to fight against a stranger with a Lord Windgrace or a Derevi deck. There's so much, and a Karth the Lion, like you said, there's so much going on that it's just, like you said, it's static in your brains. Like, if they're cheating, I couldn't tell you because I have no idea what's going on in the first place.
Right.
Because they can't explain every single thing they do when they're taking, 50 actions in a turn. We'll be here all night. Lastly, I have Randy's decks. Go Shintai, the deck I made fun of and have come to, I guess, rue the day on that one. This one can start with nothing and end with something in one turn. It's a lot of that enchantment synergy where he draws cards, he creates it, he's making a bunch of tokens. Suddenly he's got 50 creatures on board, and they all have some kind of trigger, they're all doing something, and now he's swinging with gigantic creatures with trample. It's like, wow, I thought I might have had at least one more turn coming. It definitely kind of upsets the status quo of a match. Like, it breaks parity a lot.
Yeah.
Miriam, I know y'all haven't got your chances to talk about Randy's decks, but Miriam, I think, is one of his scariest ones. It kind of goes the same way with
definitely.
Geshath, where he's getting these gigantic dragons, and then he's getting a second one. And I keep wanting this Dragons versus Dinosaurs game to happen, and it just never does. And I'm on my hands and knees, Randy. Please,
Let's do it tomorrow. We'll all
do it tomorrow.
run tribal. Edgar
Yes,
Markov,
please.
Gishath, Miriam.
Okay.
Which tribe do y'all want me to run?
I'd have to look at one of the 50 decks you have to
Yeah, I
figure it
know.
out.
I'll do wizards.
Oh, great.
Oh, great.
Oh, we're having so much fun. Miriam's, she can be very scary. And I think it's the same problem with Geshath, is that sometimes you don't hit the ramp and it doesn't kind of go off. Like the last time we tried Dinosaurs vs. Dragons, I couldn't get off the ground and Randy was getting beat on by Ragavan the whole time. So if you're not getting that ramp, these Miriam and Geshath aren't going to work.
That dang monkey with a gun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just resigned myself a long time ago with Miriam because I had made a Miriam deck also.
Uh-huh.
I just resigned myself when I face it. I'm like, you have to pay the ward.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
like, I can't spend that time like just bargaining with myself and being like, but Swords of Plowshares only cost 1. Do I really want to pay 4 to hit Miriam? And it's like, yes, I want to pay 4 to hit Miriam.
Mm-hmm.
Is it Ward 3 or Ward 2?
I think it's Ward 2.
Anyway, you just have to say, well, I got to pay the ward for it. I
Gotta
can't.
pay the troll toll.
Yeah, you got to pay the toll. I can't spend that time, just sitting here letting it stay on the battlefield because I, quote unquote, want to get my money's worth on my spell. It's like, nope, that's the threat, and it must be removed at all costs.
Mm-hmm. Lastly, for Randy, I have Marchesa the Black Rose. This is the Grixis one, the red, blue, black one. She's a very resilient deck. She's all about putting counters on creatures, and then those creatures dying, coming back, getting more into the battlefield triggers, and just kind of going off. This is another one, kind of like Benjamin's Ravos Timna and Nethroi decks. It's so hard to stop it because, if you kill it, it'll just be back next turn, more than likely.
Yeah.
So it definitely takes a lot of work to get around that one. I put some honorable mentions for Randy also. His Darien deck, which was turned into an O'Hare Talk. That one used to be, same with Krenko, those used to be kind of like the OG scary decks, but once we played it against that enough, it's like, oh, well, if he doesn't have Darien, there's no problem.
I feel like the only thing that stopped his Darien deck from being dominant was that he did not have enough ramp and or lands in that deck. So it would take him 8 turns to get out Darien, and if we killed him once or twice, he couldn't get him back ever. And I feel like that was our saving grace on that one, because I put Darien on my list.
Yeah.
I also put Marchesa and Miriam, but Darien, for me, is the ultimate one, because it kind of was like, hey, in the turns that we're all setting up, he's building an impenetrable fort.
That
if
gains
we all
him
play our
life for
commanders,
every game action.
yeah, every single thing. We kill his creature, he gains life. We don't kill his creature, he gains life.
Yeah.
It gets to where it's kind of like, okay, I wipe the board, he gains life, and puts all those creatures back on the board.
Yeah, he actually came out on top from that one.
Yeah. And it's like, oh my goodness. To me, that's one of the ones where it would get to a point where it's like, there's nothing I can do to break through. And he had the inevitability of, if we just keep doing this, my life will creep up 500, 550, 1,000 while we're waiting. And eventually I will draw, what's the one that deals 50 damage?
Aetherflux Reservoir.
Eventually I will draw Aetherflux Reservoir, or the one that makes all the Pegasus.
Call the Stormherd?
Stormherd.
Oh, Stormherd. Yeah.
Felidar Sovereign.
It's like there's enough cards in there that, yes, it wasn't great with card draw, and yes, it was slow, and I think like those things could have been fixed, but the thing was, if you didn't take advantage of the slowness with a quick deck, then you got stuck. And he had inevitability on his side. You had to solve the puzzle while he had 1 million blockers, 1 million life, and kind of a stranglehold on the game. And it's the kind of deck where that stranglehold wasn't oppressive. You could still do your thing. You could build all your dragons or your, set up your combo or whatever, but then you just couldn't kill him with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that deck was always so frustrating to face. And I always made the mistake. It was like, I want to get in there. He's sitting there with Darien and one other creature. Can I swing in for 20 damage now? And the answer is no, you should not do that. But it was so tempting, and that would just be what starts it, right? Okay, now I've got 20 tokens. I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And those 20 tokens are going to gain him 20 life when they attack.
Yeah.
or whatever.
And when they die.
Yeah. And when they die, and everything else.
And they gave me loses 20 life in multiple different ways because of pre-lifelink cards that basically gave lifelink. So that was nice.
Yeah.
The worst thing in that deck is that Darien costs 6 mana and he has no evasion. That's what kills the deck. And that he can't force us, because he's not in red, to like goad or something. He can't force us to attack him. Or I guess what if the opposite of goad was, where we have to attack him to...
Red did have a
was like
few cards like that, where it says you have to attack. The one that always comes to my mind is Trove of Temptation.
Yeah.
Which is a really awful card. You shouldn't play it. It gets you 1 treasure per upkeep, and an opponent has to attack you with at least 1 creature.
Oh, okay.
It's a bad card.
I'm sitting here thinking that if you were to do it again, Randy, there are things that you could have done. You could put in Monarch where people want to hit you to steal the Monarch. It's very much like my Aragorn King of Gondor deck, where I built it where I want to keep the Monarch as long as possible. I want to, well, for you don't want to deter attackers, but you want to kind of control the combat steps and kind of who's doing what. I guess it's hard to do that in mono white.
Yeah.
Coveted Jewel, things that entice people to come hit you, that you can use your tokens that you get to steal that stuff back. Anyways, the last honorable mention I have for Randy is Irawas. This was like the second deck he built. This one was a monster back in the day because it was just King of Combat. We couldn't...
Right.
They don't take combat damage, so it was just... Feels like a very impossible task to try to like beat him with combat damage. You had to like kind of go around different ways.
Yeah. I do want to say, I don't think we've seen O'Hare Talk at its best yet.
I agree.
You know, we've only gotten, I think, 1 game, right?
Yeah.
Because Randy, last time we played was all your Commander Masters precons. Mm-hmm. So I think we've only got 1 game with O'Hare Talk as commander. I'd be interested in seeing what it can do. Maybe not this next time we play, depending on if you have other plans. But I bet Randy's still got some tricks up his sleeve with that deck that we haven't seen.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm sure there is.
Randy.
It's a precon!
O'Hare Talk?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. You said what you're talking. I was thinking the black 40k deck.
Oh, the Necrons.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying...
You're talking, I was thinking Necron. Yeah,
I'm saying I'm sure your O'Hare Talk deck has tricks we haven't seen.
Yeah, because I swapped out a good 20 or 30 cards
Yeah.
whenever I changed it from Darien. I mean, honestly, most of the life gain is gone. Like, there's maybe 1 or 2 life gain
If
cards
there's
in
that
there,
many differences, you should just also keep Darien built.
I mean, it's already... I mean,
that way,
I guess I could...
Y'all, that way
Randy
Randy has Darien, O'Hare Talk, and what's the white god?
God Eternal
Oketra. God Eternal Oketra. Randy's sitting here with 3 mono white decks.
No, if I do another token deck or anything like that, it's going to be either Ouroboros or red-white or red-white-green. So I think I'm leaning more toward red-white combat tricks.
Cool.
Hell yeah.
And then, of course, I want to do a slime deck. But anyway.
Benjamin, what are some decks that we still haven't talked about that get under your skin?
Yeah, okay, so for Derek's decks, I just put all of them, and I think it comes down to what Randy was mentioning. Basically, he has so few, he has the fewest of all of us, kind of by half, right?
Yeah.
The next person is Randy at 19, and Derek's only got 11. And it's because he puts such care and thinks about each one and meticulously tinkers with them until they are works of art. So I don't think he has one that I'm just like, oh, okay, this will be fine. You know, he'll beat me with Gyruda. He'll beat us all with Joda. I don't think we got to see Galadriel go off, but I could see it starting as that game wound down, right? Alinda was so resilient and was a problem. Mm-hmm. It's just one of those things where it's like, man, if he pulls out a new deck, I expect it to do something crazy. And then he was picking us apart with Frodo and Sam. That one.
Oh,
game,
yeah. Why do all these hobbits hurt so bad?
Right.
It's like death by 1,000 cuts. And he's gaining life the entire time.
Yeah. The ones that y'all have mentioned for Randy's decks, I kind of was right there with y'all. Except I had forgotten about his Oketra deck. And it's the same thing. It's like, why won't anything stay dead? Why is mono white this good? How is everybody saying that white is the weakest color in Magic when Randy keeps building these?
Oh yeah,
I don't know.
He understands. He sees the code somewhere in mono white that none of the rest of us get.
Right.
I would say I don't think it's that white is the weakest. I just feel like, and we've said this before, that white's color identity has just been cut up and given to other colors. It's like, we'll give them exile as well, and we'll give them life gain as well, and we'll give them this, and it's like, what is white's standout feature?
Well, white's standout feature is
exile.
No, board wipes.
Yeah.
And I do have a mono white deck that is board wipe tribal.
Uh-oh.
But like you have managed to make white good without that. And yes, other colors get pieces of white's identity, but that also means that those other colors have to deal with mana bases that are, that are weak or
Diluted.
Diluted. You don't. You just play planes, do your thing, which means sometimes you'll get to take advantage of having lots of planes. I don't know. Anytime he pulls out a mono white deck, those are always really hard to deal with, and I had forgotten about Oketra. And then on Travis, we've already talked about Sisei and Winota. To me, Ural, the new one you built, Ural the Miststalker, that just loads up on enchantments and swings in, it goes crazy too fast. For me.
Yeah.
Too fast?
Too fast for me. Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, I'm glad you think so.
Yeah, I mean, now there's a chance that as we play with it more, I'll start to feel a little better. But for now, I'm just like, man, this is crazy. And then Merkel has the same problem where things don't stay dead.
Yeah.
And it's so much harder to kill them the second time.
Yeah.
It's
because they become an enchantment instead of a creature.
Yeah. And they're just sitting back there, and of course you've loaded them up with a lot of cheap things like Mother of Runes that protect everything else, so that it's hard to kill them the first time, and then they come back and they're able to still provide all that value, but also protect all your new stuff. I don't know. It's those two. I don't like things that don't stay dead, which of course is why I build the things that don't stay dead.
Yeah.
But like when y'all start doing it, I'm like, now wait a second.
Now hold on.
Now wait just a minute here.
Y'all are supposed to roll over and die.
So I guess I'm last. Basically all the decks that have been mentioned, I've kind of been chiming in whenever they were also on my list. But there was one that hasn't quite been talked about yet, and that's Derek's Gyruda deck. Gyruda Doom of Depths. This is a clone deck, but really it's kind of a combo deck, where once Gyruda is cast, his ability is that each player mills the top 4 cards of their library into their graveyard, and then Derek can pick a card with an even mana cost and put those onto the battlefield under his control. Probability is going to dictate that the card he picks is one of his own clones with an even mana cost, and he's going to use it to copy Gyruda. That way he's going to get that ability again and again and again. Or he just steals something that one of us has milled that's going to warp the board in his favor and take over the game. Otherwise, why would he pick it?
Yeah.
So it is an absolutely awesome deck where whenever it comes out, I'm like, I don't know what to hope for or what to do, whenever you play Gyruda for the first time. And it's a 6/6 body on top of everything else.
Yeah, it's a monster. I remember when it came out, Benjamin and I were talking. This was Ikoria, and I don't remember exactly what the conversation was, but we were talking about this card for some reason, and Benjamin was like, I think it'd be really good with clones. I was like, wow, you know what? You're really right. A lot of those clones are even mana cost. Mm-hmm. So because of Benjamin, this is how this deck came about.
No.
This was probably the one that started the ball rolling into my villain arc.
Benjamin, the evil devil on your shoulder, being, I think you should build Gyruda clones.
Yeah.
Right.
And the idea was like, hey, I can play this deck as casually or as sweaty, try hard as I need to be.
That's absolutely true about clones. I have my Volrath the Shapestealer deck that's full of clone abilities and stuff. I really, really enjoy playing it for that exact reason. I can make it as fun and casual as the cool stuff my opponents are playing, or I can make Volrath copy something that's unblockable and win with commander damage. Like, it's just...
Yeah, it's just like a different experience every time I play it. I love playing the deck, and I actually was going to play it this Saturday, tomorrow actually.
Yeah.
Because it's the last deck I have that hasn't been played.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool deck. All the other decks that were on my list have been talked about. I mentioned Karth the Lion earlier, just because, like we mentioned, it's a deck with tons of Planeswalkers, and all of those Planeswalkers give Benjamin 2 to 3 choices to make each turn with them. And when you attack Planeswalkers, you're not attacking the player, and so the game goes on a little longer. It gives him more options to choose for the next turn. The black and green Planeswalkers are all really good. Mm-hmm. They have a lot of removal, a lot of token generation, so Benjamin can put up walls around him and his Planeswalkers in that way too. For example, Nissa and Garruk both make Saprolings or Beast tokens or whatever, and Liliana makes zombie tokens.
Yep.
So all of those are really great defensive options, especially for planeswalkers. And then green and black planeswalkers have lots of removal attached to them, so Benjamin can really run a really safe, high removal control game with Karth the Lion. And Karth is just helping him generate draw. It doesn't say draw directly on the card, but you get to maintain your card advantage by digging down into your deck and getting another planeswalker into your hand to play. Benjamin, isn't it every time a planeswalker dies and when Karth enters the battlefield?
Yes.
Wow, so yeah, even if you use your planeswalker's minus ability, even if it's not the ultimate, but it kills it, it gets down to loyalty 0, you get to replace it with another planeswalker in your hand. Like, that is so good. Just black-green, control, defense, super resilient, plenty of virtual card draw to keep your game plan going, an overwhelming number of options so that it's confusing to play against. It's a really good deck.
Yes. These are all really good decks.
Yeah, I really was looking forward to this episode where we could all kind of gush and compliment each other over the amazing decks that our meta has the pleasure to have in it, which keeps that variety and keeps our meta interesting. Benjamin, you mentioned a deck with board wipe tribal, and so I want to hand over this week's news from the Warfront to you.
Okay, so this was found on REDH, the Reddit forum for discussing Commander, and they have a deck built around Child of Alara, and actually Travis used to have a deck built around Child of Alara.
Yeah, and I played it once for the exact reason that you're about to see.
Yes, it was built around sacking and recurring Child of Alara over and over again, and Child of Alara has an ability that says when it dies, then you destroy all non-land permanents. So basically, with Child of Alara and a way to sack it, especially for value, then you can keep the board clear, and games can take forever. And so this person's friend built a Child of Alara deck, and this person said, hey, no one's going to want to play with you if you play that, so you're just wasting money building this deck. And the person says, whatever, I'll do what I want. And then after the first time, people said, you know what, I don't want to play with that anymore. And the friend is mad, and every time the friend pulls out this deck, people go, never mind, you win, and they kind of pick up and they scoop and go on to the next game. And this poster says that their friend is confused by why people don't like playing against this. As someone with a board white tribal deck, I don't play it very often because people don't like to play against decks that don't let them play the game.
Yeah.
And I will say there's probably an exception for a certain type of player who loves to solve the puzzle and doesn't mind playing from behind, but that's rare. And most people play the game as a form of expression, and if every time they get a turn, they tap all their mana, they play a creature, pass, and by the time it gets back to them, their creature's gone, and they haven't gotten anything out of it, and that's all they're doing the whole game for 20 turns or something like that, until someone slowly and painfully beats them to death, they didn't have a good time.
Yeah.
Right? The idea of, somebody in the comments actually said it real well, if you're going to play mean, at least play fast, right? If you're going to play stacks or board white tribal or something like that, have a way to win that's obvious so people don't feel bad scooping to it.
Right.
Or have a way to finish on the spot. And so I don't feel bad about having my board wipe tribal deck because it's full of indestructible creatures. So I'm actually incrementally gaining obvious board advantage every time I board wipe. I'm not setting the board to 0. I'm setting everyone else to 0, and then I'm swinging in.
Yeah.
And it might take me a few turns to kill people, but it still isn't necessarily fun for everyone else. But that's one of those things that we kind of go on about a lot on this podcast, which is, hey, if you aren't doing things that make the game fun for others, you're going to run out of people to play with you. So a grindy deck is fine, but a grindy deck that prevents the game from moving forward and takes 3 hours to win is bordering on not fine, right? It's the worst kind of solitaire.
Yeah, it's solitaire that holds other people hostage.
Yeah, because at least Travis's Winota deck, it might take a 20 or 30 minute turn, but I got to see something real cool, and it was exciting, and things were happening, and creatures are flying on and off the board, and we're all getting pinged to death slowly as he digs through his deck. But a Child of Alara sacrifice deck, they're not even playing with themselves. They're playing their commander, they're sacking it to draw cards, and then they're passing the turn, and the next person has nothing. And the next person does nothing. The next person does nothing. Next person plays Child of Alara, pass. Next person says, ugh. and can choose whether or not they're going to play into another board wipe or not.
Yeah.
And it's a miserable experience.
Yeah, just any game in a social setting is optional. And we've talked about this a lot, that these games that you're playing just with your family around the table or with your friends around the kitchen table or at the bar, there's no stakes. The only thing at stake is the fun of each player. So gaming in a social setting like these where there's no stakes is optional. Every person can say no. So if you pull up to a game like Magic and you reveal your list, you reveal your commander, you reveal your army, and you tell the other person, you telegraph to the other person before the game has started, I'm going to make you miserable for an hour and a half.
For 3 hours. It's not an hour and a half.
An hour and a half, 3 hours, I'm thinking Warhammer. I'm thinking, all of these games where you roll up, both people kind of display what they're coming to the game with. And if you just show up and say, and you have a neon sign that says you're going to be miserable for the duration of this game, however long it goes. Like, that game, the other player has every right to say, you know what, this game is not going to happen. I'm going to choose to play with somebody else. Now, I suppose there is a scenario, the competitive scene, the tournament scene, where if somebody else comes into that situation, they are kind of obligated to face you and to spend that time with you. So if you want to play the absolute no fun deck, board wipe tribal, really, really high stacks. Sorry, when we say stacks, it's a variation of the word tax, where you're going to make somebody pay for every action they take.
It comes from an old card called Smokestacks.
Yeah. You're going to slow the game way, way down. In every social setting, with no prizes on the line, with no stakes, that's an optional experience that this person is discovering, not the poster, but this poster's friend with this unfun Child of Alara board wipe deck. They're discovering that if your opponents have the option to say no, they can take it, and you're left without any players.
Yeah.
And yeah, you did waste your money creating an unfun experience for others.
I'm going to push back a little bit on that. I don't think it's a bad thing to have built the deck or to have the deck. And there are some comments in here that say some people like playing with and against grindy decks, stacks, or prison decks, or things like that, control decks. But there's a time and place for it, and you can't get mad at other people for not liking something that goes against the usual social contract.
Yeah.
So I do keep my board wipe tribal deck. I was thinking about packing it. I ultimately decided not to for tomorrow, but it will make an appearance at some point in the next few times we play, because I need a mono white for the checklist.
Sure.
So I mean, there's nothing wrong with having it, with building it, with finding some people who enjoy it, but that's the key. You need to find some people who say, all right, yeah, let's give it a try. I'm willing to play with you, and you should be up front when you're playing against strangers. You need to find out when people are going to be up for having that sort of experience. And if everyone you play with on a regular basis says, no, I'm not interested, then yes, it's a waste of money.
Yeah. I will also say, and remember, this is coming from a guy, I've had a couple decks like this. I had an Avacyn Angel of Hope deck. Literally, I think my first or second or third commander deck was Avacyn Angel of Hope board wipes. Mm-hmm. So I've been there. I did it. I had Child of Alara, and I do think you learn a lot from building a deck like that. It's kind of the Jurassic Park. I was worried so much about if I could do it, I wasn't thinking about whether or not I should do it. So I certainly learned a lot, and I think I became a better player by considering that as an avenue to victory. But if I'm trying to cultivate a healthy meta where the expectation is that people can express themselves, expressing yourself in the game of Magic means paying mana and casting spells, and in a lot of cases that means moving to combat. Like, those are all things that people expect to do in a game of Magic. And so if you create a deck that denies all of those fundamental parts of the experience, then you're going to find a lot of people push back against that.
Yeah, I feel like the normal person is not going to want this. I feel like, I know there are some people who enjoy the grind or whatever, but I feel like it's like 1 out of 10 people or something. It's like, I feel like it's something you need to have your group opt into. Like, hey, this is going to be a miserable experience. Are you guys up for the challenge?
Yeah.
Because I this is the thing I hate about board wipe tribal decks and mass land destruction is that these decks do it just to do it. Like, oh yeah, I'm setting my opponents back, but you're like setting yourself back. Usually they don't have some kind of an asymmetrical type of board wipe or whatever. Like Child of Lara wipes everyone's board.
Yeah.
And I know
it
there's
wipes
things
everyone's
that
board.
some things that wipe just your opponent's boards. Those are fine. And when you have to every once in a while use a board wipe, but ones that just wipe everything every single turn, like what a miserable experience.
Yeah.
When it's not like what I wanted to sign up for.
I'm going to come in and kind of toot my little horn. Whenever I built my Child of Alara deck, I also filled it with the indestructible Theros gods. Mm-hmm. That way I had effects that were staying on my board as I continued wiping everybody else's. I thought that was a neat, build idea.
Yeah.
But that still doesn't necessarily make it any fun to play against.
Yeah, it's like, oh boy, I can't do anything this turn. Can't do anything the next turn. Can't do it. Like, what are we doing? Why are we playing this game if I can't do anything? You just want to I can't say what I was going to say, but anyways.
Yeah.
I will say, if you're going to play competitively, there are prizes on the line. Sure, play board wipe tribal. Break their morale. You owe them nothing. You're playing for prizes. You're right. They're signing up to, play the best they can.
Yeah.
And, feel free to play it. I guarantee you won't make it far if it's a CDEDH competition. There are people with counter spells and all kinds of things. They're comboing, and a board wipe tribal deck's just not going to make it.
Yeah.
But, hey, give it a shot. Maybe they'll have fun. Maybe you'll have fun.
Y'all, I sold my copy of Armageddon at TCGCon.
Wow.
Yep.
Oh, darn.
I said goodbye, Armageddon.
That's the mass
I
land
used
one, right?
you. I had my fun. It's the mono white destroy all lands.
Yeah. Boo.
Yeah. I said I had my fun. I think I did it 2 or 3 times with my Avacyn deck, and then I saw it sail into the night in the hand of another
Sold
Magic
it,
player.
And then just bought 6 Ragavans.
No, Armageddon's not that expensive.
One in every red... No, I know, I'm just messing around.
Well, cool. This is going to be a bit of a longer episode, but I think it was a fun one. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed it.
It was good.
Benjamin, hit us up with some words of wisdom.
Okay, well, we've all talked about the decks that we fear in our meta, and one of the things we talked about was, hey, there's 2 ways to approach a fear. You can grieve it, right? Deny it, get angry, fight against it, bargain with it, or you can accept it, face it head on, and take it as a challenge to be overcome. And it doesn't just apply to gaming. In fact, if anything, you should say, hey, this applies to your life more than it applies to gaming. Being afraid of a deck or thinking you're going to have no fun, that's a normal part of any gaming experience, trying to protect this, your precious few hours to hope it has fun. But in other areas of your life where you're afraid to ask that person out, to apply to that job, to whatever it is, right? Don't let fear get in the way of, accepting that challenge and going and doing the bigger thing. Right? Go and do it. Don't let the fear stop you. Don't let it keep you from doing those things. Go do something scary and be proud that you have the ability to face it, right? None of the decks that we've talked about are unstoppable. We sometimes get that sinking feeling when someone pulls out their main character, when someone pulls out one of these decks. But notice when Derek and Randy were talking about dragons versus dinosaurs, he's like, okay, let's do tribal, right? And then they suggested, okay, I'm gonna bring out Edgar Markov. Well, now you've got 3 boogeymen against each other. Somebody's gonna lose, and that means somebody's going to win against the thing that strikes fear in them. So we all have that capability, right? Are there insurmountable things in life? Probably. I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke, right? But most of the time, the things that make us afraid are not the insurmountable things. They're the things that are absolutely surmountable, but that are holding us back anyway. The public speaking, the being afraid of rejection, those little things that are keeping you from having your fun and experiencing the bigger things in life. So go do it. Go face your fears.
Love it. Any closing words from Derek or Randy?
Let's get the hell out of here.
Let's do it. Let's go.
I second that.
Thank you guys so much for listening. Remember that you can find us on Patreon. Become a patron at patreon.com/mymythicalmeta. You can leave comments through YouTube or Spotify. Please leave a 5-star review if you have it in your heart. And you can also contact us directly at mymythicalmeta@eldoradogaming.com. Don't forget that you can use promo code META at eldoradogaming.com for 10% off your shiny dice purchases. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you for listening, and thank you guys for being my great friends. Adios.
Bye.
I'll seize you when I seize you.
Ditto.
This episode was sponsored by Eldorado Gaming. Use the promo code META for 10% off your order. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share. This episode was edited by me, Travis Konishek, and our intro and outro music is by Tyler Heath of the Oh Hellos.